I just want to start off by thanking Rabbi Tzakov and Benji Suss for speaking. We last year, as you know, we did not have Shavuot together, so we couldn't have a night of learning as we usually do in our shul. So we had online learning, and that was the best we could do. This year, because it was so popular last year, I figured why not have a pre-Shavuot online learning again, and we'll have Shavuot learning as well. So more Torah. It can't hurt, especially at times like this. We know Torah has the ability to bring peace. We also know Torah has the ability. I just told somebody today who was telling me they're not feeling well and they're stuck at home. I said, well, if you're not feeling well, you should definitely go to the class tonight because Torah gives refuah. So you have nothing better to do for sure. You're going to feel all better after some Torah. It's better than any vaccination, better than any inoculation. So let's start with the parsha. Parsha in a nutshell, we like to start off with, and then we go into our what are called deep dive into the actual psukim. So the parsha is called Bamidbar. It's the first parsha of the fourth book of the Torah, and in English the book is called Numbers, which is not so far from what Chazal also called the book. Besides Bamidbar, which means in the desert, Bamidbar has a lot of countings, has a lot of numbers. This parsha especially, but later on in the parsha, a few times, in fact, we're going to have censuses, and they are all worth investigating and learning about. We'll get to them as we get to them. So the parsha this week talks about the different census of the Jewish people, how many there were right before they leave Har Sinai, and then it talks about how they were arranged in certain groupings as they traveled and as they encamped. And then it talks about the jobs of the Levium and how the Levium were actually counted differently from the rest of the Jewish people. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see why that is. We have two opinions that I plan to study with you tonight on that question alone. So let's no further ado. Let me share the screen, and I'm going to share the. Oh, that's not the screen I want to share with you. And there's our world famous parsha sheet, the source sheet that I shared with you in your email. If you did not get the email, let me know, and then we can worry about that later. Meanwhile, the first pasuk, the first two pasukim in the parsha say, "V'yidaber Hashem Moshe b'midbar Sinai b'oel moed b'echad l'chodesh sheni b'shana hashenit l'tzeitam l'eretz Mitzrayim le'mor." Very, very long introduction. Hashem spoke to Moshe in the desert of Sinai, in the Ohel Moed, whatever that is. We're going to call it the tent of meeting, for lack of a better translation for now. It was on the first of the month. It wasn't the first month. It was the second month. So the first day of the second month. So really the first day of ER, right? And Nisan is considered the first month. The next month is ER. So the first of ER in the second year after they left Mitzrayim, this is what he said to them. Su'u ad rosh kol adat b'nei Israel, pick up or raise up the head of all of the groups of all of the congregations of Bnei Israel, Lemishpochotam, according to their families, Leveit Avotam, according to their father's house, B'mispar Shemot, according to the number of their names, whatever that means. We're not going to be able to get through all of these different nuanced phrases. They all mean something different, and they're all worth investigating. But we'll get to a particular theme, I hope, in just a moment. Mispar Shemot Kol Zachar Legugotam. Each male was counted according to his skull, literally Legugotam, according to it was basically a head count. Now, what's interesting is it was not a head count. They were counted by the half shekel, as we've learned before, and that's how they knew how many Jewish people there were. And it's interesting that they're still called Google Otam according to their heads. So right off the bat, let's look at the prime commentary, Rashi. Rashi tells us why were they counted to begin with. It says there, um, why were they counted? Mitoch kipan lefanav mona otam kol sha'a. Because Hashem loves the Jewish people, He has such a chiba, such a love for the Jewish people, He's going to count them all the time. When they left Mitzrayim, He counted them. When they sinned with the Egel Hazav Minan, He counted them again. To know how many people were left, etc. Hashem counts them all the time, over and over and over again. Very important. Rashi, it shows a few things. One is that Hashem loves the Jewish people, but it also shows that our nature, what we understand of human nature, is that when we have something that's important to us, we count them. Right? If we have, if money is important to us, so we're busy counting money. Right? If baseball cards are important to a child, I don't know if anybody has baseball cards anymore, but they count how many they have. They know how many they have. They know how many. They know the statistics of their favorite athletes. They know if somebody's into particular music, then they know their favorite bands. They know how many albums. You know which track on which albums or which particular song. Those numbers are important to us. And we keep count of these things. How many number one hits some artist has? These kind of things. This minutia. It's for somebody else. It's minutia. For you, if you care about it, it's ingrained. It's something that's important to you, and you'll remember it. With that said, Hashem, even though He doesn't need to do this, Hashem is like that too. Hashem acts like a human being in this instant, where He counts the Jewish people, even though obviously He knows every single blade of grass. He doesn't need to count us, but to show how much He loves us, just like we show how much we care about something by counting it, Hashem counts us over and over again, show how much He loves us. That's the Rashi. Classic understanding. He takes that from the Gemara, from the Midrashim. Very nice. Adds the Seforno. It doesn't just say He counted them, but over and over again, it says B'mispar Shemot, according to the number of their names. Now, why is that important? Why? What does a name represent? One second. Okay, yeah, just checking something. I apologize. Back to that. What does a name represent? So he says, each one was mentioned. Each one was remembered by his name. Hamora al Tzurato, Siyat L'Maltam al Derech Ve'edcha B'Shem. Hashem tells Moshe back in Shemot, He said, and I knew you by name. Right? In other words, what does that mean? I knew you by name. It means that knowing somebody's name shows a special relationship to that person. I remember many, many years ago. I'm talking about, I don't want to say how long ago, but this is back when Rabbi Korovkin was the rabbi of the shul here. I was sitting in his class. I don't remember what the class subject was. I think it might have been Maharal. It was a Shabbat afternoon. And he was talking about how people back then used to have phone numbers memorized. And somebody in the class said, I don't remember certain phone numbers. He says to the person point blank, he said, you know why you don't remember that number? Because you don't care to. What we care about, we remember, and we know the name. If we don't know somebody's name, somebody who's working in our building, or somebody who's in our life, but we don't know their name, the chances are we don't really care that much about them. You know the names of your children, right? You know the names of your favorite athlete and band and everything else. You know the name, right? Say their name, right? So the name of somebody, the phone number of somebody, if that's important to you, it's something you'll remember. And if you don't remember it, that means you don't really care that much. Um, I remember also. I remember a gabbai once told me. I said, there's some people's names are easy. My name's easy. I have one first name. My father had one first name, so Gershom ben, Nachum ben Gershom. That's my name. Easy to remember for most gabbais, unless it's a unusual name, maybe whatever. It might be difficult. Some people have like 5, 6 names, literally. They have to have 3 names of their own. Their father has 2 names. A gabbai has to remember all of that. So I asked the gabbai once, "How do you do it? How do you remember all this?" He says, "I care about them. If you care about them, you remember their names." I find that to be true. Very often, people give me a name to daven for or whatever, and I write it down. And then when it's time to daven, I don't have the paper or I don't have my phone that I wrote down the name on. I remember the name because I care. I want to be able to pray for somebody. So it's when you care about somebody, you remember their name. So Sforno is telling us, it's Hashem not just cares about us enough to count us. Each individual is so important to Hashem that each name is mentioned. Of course, there's deeper understandings here. We have to remember that a name is a name represents the person. A name represents who the person is. By Hashem, by the person having to announce their name to Moshe, who's counting them, or to Hashem, who's keeping tabs on how many people there are. So by mentioning your name, you're really saying, Hashem is saying, you're that important to me, that the essence of who you are is something I want to hold on to. Speaking of a deeper understanding, the Chida in Pnei David, the Chida writes, it's interesting that we say the names, right? Why Mispar Shemot? Ma Perusha, what's the explanation? He says, if Shar, perhaps the reason why the name had to be mentioned is very similar to what the Sforno said, but sort of on the opposite end. When you don't like somebody, you don't want to mention their name. The name of the name that their name is the last thing you ever want to say. And his proof for that, by the way, is in the Parsha of in the Haftarah for Machar HaChodesh, where it said Yehonatan, when he was asked, he was the David HaMelech's best friend. He's also the son of Shaul HaMelech, and Shaul hated David. So when Shaul asked his son Yehonatan, "Where is David?" He didn't say, "Where is David?" He said, "Where is Ben Yishai? Where's Ben Yishai? Where's the son of Yishai?" He hated David so much he couldn't even say his name. He hated him so much, right? So by saying our names, right? He said, "Aviv yadati ki bocher ata ben Yishai." So he again. So the idea of the love that Hashem has for the Jewish people is so much that He wants to say our name. He wants to emphasize our greatness. On the same topic here is a very beautiful thought from Rav Moshe Feinstein in Darash Moshe. Zecher Tzedek Livracha. He points out, as we mentioned last week, that there is a takana, there is a rule made by Ezra HaSofer more than 2,000 years ago. Ezra HaSofer made a rule that about 2,500 years ago, approximately, that when the parsha before Shavuot, Shabbat before Shavuot, we read the Tochacha of Bechukotai, and that's what we did last week. Baruch Hashem, we could do that. Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, maybe there's another reason for that takana. Maybe there's another reason. He says that so he quotes the takana from the Tosfot in Megillah, page 31b. All right, and then he says like this. Perhaps there's another reason why we have the parsha of Bechukotai last week. Is that we'd have Bamidbar this week. the week, the Shabbat before Shavuot, since Bechukotai is always the Shabbat before Shavuot, Bamidbar is always the Shabbat before Shavuot. So why is that? So he says maybe there's an important reason. Maybe it's because of this idea. Maybe we need to know how much Hashem loves us before we are Mikabel HaTorah, before we take on the Torah that Rabbi Yitzchakov was gracious enough to speak to us about. Before that Kabbalat Torah, before we accept the Torah, we need to we need to know how much Hashem loves us. The Torah is not some sort of weapon that Hashem uses against us. The Torah is Hashem's love. As we say, Rabbi Chanan ben Akasha Amar Ratza Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakot Israel. Hashem wanted to give zchut to Israel, and that's why He gave him Torah and mitzvot. Right? That's why. So the Torah and mitzvot is an opportunity for us to gain zchut, to gain merits before Hashem, and to grow in mitzvot. But aside from that, what is Shavuot? This learning on Shavuot. You're staying up all night. Some people do, or you stay up later than usual, and you learn Torah. What's the point? Are you going to learn more Torah than you would have learned in a nice, calm afternoon with a good night's sleep? No. Obviously, you can learn more with good sleep. What's the point? The point is to show the chiba, to show how much we love Hashem. It's very important to understand that the whole Torah learning experience is not just an intellectual pursuit. How much can I learn? It's how much do I want to connect? People, unfortunately, I've seen people who've not been as successful in Torah study as they wanted to be, and they give up. They say, what's the point? I can't do it. It's not for me. I'm going to go into business, or worse, I'll just drop Torah and Yiddishkeit altogether. So there are people who feel that way. They feel very distraught by the fact that they have not accomplished as much as they wanted to in Torah. That's the wrong idea. That's actually Yetzer Hara working against you. The idea of learning Torah for men and for women, by the way, is not that we're just learning in order to fill up a sack of Torah knowledge. The idea is to show how much we love Hashem. So he says, Rav Moshe, he says that this is exactly what Hashem wants. Hashem wants so the Adarabah, which is Adarabah. It says Adarabah. Sorry. Sheyesh toin ve'osin hifuch ratzon Hashem. People trying to do the exact opposite of what Hashem wants, but they're actually doing the Ratzon Hashem, the exact will of what Hashem wants. Afshehu gilgel ba'ofen litzad shekeneged aval nitgalgel lehifuch. So the people end up doing the exact opposite of what Hashem wants. Hashem's challenging us to learn Torah, to really show how much on Shavuot is our opportunity to show how much we love Hashem and see how much He loves us. It's a relationship, and it's not supposed to be unrequited love, like in all the poetry in the world, right? The point is to show Hashem that it's requited. He loves us, we love Him back in equal measure. All right. So after everybody's counted, after we get all the numbers and everything else, we get the total of the Jewish people. This is one of the last psukim in the first very, very long parak in Bamidbar. Altogether, there's a lot of psukim in this week's parsha, but a lot of them, especially the first 3-4 aliyot, are very easy to read. It's basically numbers. Very very easy for those of us who are still doing Shnai Mikra Echad Targum, which I highly recommend for all, for everybody, men, women, children. Very important mitzvah, separate from Talmud Torah, for another time, if you don't remember our previous talks on the subject. All right, but in Bamidbar, chapter 1, verse 46, it says all the Jewish people came up to basically 603,550. That's the Jewish people, which we always say, which we sort of estimate to 600,000. Shisha Alafim, so Shisha Riboy Alafim, right? So 600,000 Jews, more or less, in the desert. So why is it 600,000? What does this number represent? We had Benji was telling us some of the gematriot earlier of how we know that there's a custom to eat dairy on Shavuot. It had to do with the gematria of chalav, right? So or not chalav. Yeah, chalav. All right, 40. All right, okay, very good. I was listening. All right, the Maharal in Gevurat Hashem talks about the different things, different significances of the different lessons we learned from the Jewish people as they were leaving Mitzrayim. One of them is this total number in the desert. So what does it mean that there were 600,000? So he basically says that 600,000 represents Achdut, represents unity. Why is that? Because 6 represents unity. Think about it. It's Shalem. It's complete. Now, there's the whole week when Hashem was doing the workings of the creation of the world. 6 days is how many days he was actually working. The 7th day, he created this thing called rest, this thing called Shabbat. We're not talking about that now. All right. So the fact that we had 600,000 people, otherwise known as 60 myriad, right? Myriad is 10,000. For this, the Torah is because since the Torah is shalem, is complete, it had to be given to a people who are complete, and complete is 6. How do we figure that 6 is complete? Because we know that 600,000 is how many people left Mitzrayim, the second year in the desert, as we see here, and the plains of Moab, as we're going to see at the end of Sefer Bamidbar. From this, it's obvious that the completion of all the spiritual formation of the Jewish people is a population of 600,000. We say there's 600,000 nishamot in amongst the Jewish people. Now, obviously, there's more than that in terms of people today, but however you want to understand it, whether we share nishamot or whether it's these are like the core nishamot that had toldot, that had some sort of offspring. The reason is that 6 is a complete number designed in a physical world which spreads out in 6 directions. Right? 6 is the world. Right? What do I mean 6 directions? When we shake the lulav, we shake it in all the directions. That's front, back, left, right, up, and down. That's 6 directions. The cube has 6 sides, right? The limits of the limits of our understanding of the world is 6 dimensions, as it were. Really, we call it 3 dimensions. Each direction there's a length and a width. There's a beginning, a midpoint, and all of that is basically why is what 6 represents. There's 9. Right, that's why there's 6 dots on the biggest side of a cube and a dice, right, and a die. That's the same idea. When we're that number, when we're that complete, when we're a cube all on our own, that's when Hashem can give us the Torah, which is also complete. And of course, the lesson here is, besides, again, how much Hashem loves the Jewish people, a part of the lesson here is also that the Torah is complete. There's nothing that it's missing, and there's nothing that we're going to add to it, and there's nothing that we can take out of it. It is a complete thing. If you take a die and you want to take out one of the dots, if you want to fill it up, what's going to happen? You're going to have an incomplete die. It'll be good for cheating, but it's not good for much anything else. You're not going to have all 6 numbers anymore. Right. That's what he says over there. You can look it up on your own if you have the opportunity. This sheet is available to all. Really, it's shared in the entire Sepharia community. All right, a few psukim later, chapter 1, verse 49. We have a very interesting command amongst the fact that the Jewish people needed to be counted. One group was not counted specifically. Not only were they not counted, there was a commandment not to count them. Ach es mate Levi lo tifkod. Do not count Levi. And don't include them in the census of the rest of the Jewish people. Of course, they're going to be counted separately, but they're in the counting, they are not included in the 600,000. Why is that? So we're going to look at a few answers. Let's look at Rashi's second answer first. It's and then we're going to have a very so it's a long piece. We're not going to have time to go through the whole thing, but it's here for you to preview later on. It's several pages of Chaim Shmulevitz and Sichot Musar, but I'll try to summarize best I can. Rashi says an interesting thing in his second answer. Why aren't we counting Levi? Kadai hu legion shel melech liyot nimna levado. It was the legion of the king is supposed to be by itself. That's the first answer. Davar acher, second answer. So in other words, this, Rashi's first answer. Let's not cut any corners here. Rashi's first answer is that the Levi is because Levi is literally like the messengers of Hashem. They are his retinue, his court, Hashem's court. Therefore, they deserve special treatment. They deserve to be on a level above, a different level, right? Think of the class system in pre-revolutionary France, for those of you who are into that kind of history. Another answer. Tzafa HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'atida la'amod gzeira al kol hanimnim ben esrim shana v'mala sheyamutu b'midbar. Hashem made a gezerah for all the other tribes, not Levi, that they should die in the desert. Well, he will. He hasn't made the decree yet, but as we know, the Jewish people in Bamidbar are going to listen to the spies. They are going to sin by believing the spies that Eretz Yisrael is not habitable, that it's too dangerous, too many Hamas rockets, not a place to go. So the Jewish people are going to be scared. They're not going to go, and because of that, they get punished, and they have to wander the desert for another 38 years, a total of 40 years in the desert, all because they listened to the spies, but not Levi. Levi did not believe the spies. Okay. Because they didn't believe in the spies, they shouldn't be included in this count that's going to eventually show how many of the Jewish people are not going into Eretz Yisrael, right? Ages 20 to 60, which is what this 603,550 number represents. Those people will not be going into Eretz Yisrael. And since Levi is, they shouldn't be counted amongst them. That's what it says. Didn't want to include Levi because otherwise, we almost missed the most important part. All right, so Amar. So therefore, because they're not going to be in that decree to kill out the Jewish people who believe the spies, therefore Amar Hashem said, don't count them together with them. Why? They are mine. They didn't sin with the egel. Meaning what? Meaning that Levi, if they would have been included in that count, and despite the fact that they are Hashem's, despite the fact that they didn't worship the egel, nevertheless, they would also be included in this gzeirah. They would also be killed out in the desert, not killed out completely, obviously. Their descendants, that generation of Levi would be killed out, and only their descendants would go into Eretz HaKodesh. Says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz in Sichot Musar. That's very strange. Because what that's implying is that somehow Levi deserved, or deserved or not, they would have been punished along with the people who did deserve to be punished. How is that possible? How do we understand this? If they didn't, in other words, if they didn't deserve the death penalty, and they didn't, so why should they be punished? Why would including them in the count of the Jewish people have any kind of effect on them? So the fact is, individual, a yachid, who is all on his own, ba'atzmo, all on his own, or all on her own, does not get the merit of the klal, does not get the merit of the community. A person who is innocent of any crime is still going to be punished, even though he's innocent, is going to be punished, though, if he's in a community that sinned. It's very important, for example, where you pray. Chaim Shmulevitz is actually, that's what his main point here is, what he's speaking about in this mamar, is the congregation that you pray with is the congregation you get rewarded or punished with, regardless of whether you're innocent or guilty of whatever crime that the rest of the congregation was involved in. That's a very scary thought, right? In other words, when Hashem unleashes punishment, we spoke about this when it was Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time. When Hashem unleashes punishment, together with the guilty, innocent also get punished. I don't want to get into it. This is a very common question that's asked, like, what about the Holocaust, etc. So the fact is, this is a possible answer. I mean, we could develop this into a possible answer to explain why innocent people died in the Holocaust. Some people deserved it. Some people didn't individually deserve it, but because they were part of the klal, they were unfortunately punished as well. So Lamadnu Mizeh, we learned from this that the way that Hashem has the Hashem rules his olam, his world, is that when there's a gezerah ala klal, hayachala al kol mi shenimne bichlal zeh. That's the important phrase here. When there is a gezerah on the klal, on the congregation, that gezerah, that edict, is then also placed on everybody in that klal, guilty or innocent of the whatever it is that the klal perpetuated. This is justice. This is part of justice. And what Rav Chaim Shmulevitz at this point continues to do is tries to explain why that is just. Now, many of you are probably thinking that doesn't sound fair. He quotes here, by the way, the Zohar. It says, since the Zohar was quoted earlier by Benji, the Zohar also says that when it's Rosh Hashanah time, it is best for a person to pray to be judged as part of a community, and to make sure that that community is one that's going to get a good judgment. You don't want to go pray in a shul where people are speaking Lashon Hara, where people are not holding where they should be holding, and that's it's an important reason to be very careful about how we do these things. In our present verse, right, these Leviim who are not counted with the rest of Dor HaMidbar, the rest of the generation of the Midbar, is because they need to be a separate community. If they're going to be a separate community, they won't be judged with the punishment that the rest of the Jewish people are going to get. The rest of the Jewish people are going to get the punishment of having to die in the desert. We don't want the Leviim to have that too. And therefore, Hashem said, no, do not count the Leviim together with the rest of the Jewish people. that's this very long, very beautiful answer, which is very, as they say, fundamental to understanding Jewish philosophy about justice. Yes. Okay. We can also, by the way, if you want to unmute and ask a question, you may, or you can wait till the end of the class. Somebody has a question already. The question is, how can I make my muffler quieter? All right. Now we're going to skip many psukim, at least 20 psukim, to the second chapter, finally, in Bamidbar, chapter 2, verse 20. And it says there, it's talking about the different tribes, and there's a very interesting phraseology which is different from other psukim. I should have had the other psukim here so you know what I'm talking about. So we're talking about how the tribes were placed next to their banners when they were encamped, and it says there, "Va'alav matei Menashe v'nasi livnei Menashe Gamliel ben Pedatzur." So next to Ephraim, actually, is the tribe of Menashe, and it says who the leader of Menashe was. Now, what's interesting, it says that very first word, va'alav, and on him, or next to him. And the reason why that's interesting is because in all of the other psukim, literally all of the other 11 tribes, right, when it mentions them and what they were next to, it doesn't say va'alav. It says v'hachonim alav, and placed next to them. But by Menashe, it doesn't say v'hachonim alav. It says v'alav, and next to him. And the question is why? So the Meshech Chochmah has a rather short commentary here, but it's very. It just shows you the brilliance of the Meshech Chochmah. You have to really know a lot of Torah to write a commentary like his. Right? It says B'chol Makom Amar V'Hachonim Alav. By all of the other tribes, it says V'Hachonim Alav, next to him, placed next to him. V'Kana Amar V'Alav, next to him Mishum the Kevan Sheb'Mispar B'Sof Arbaim Pashat Pinchas. At the end of Pashat Pinchas, when we're counting the tribes again, Haya Mispar B'nei Ephraim Ma'at Mispar Harishon Uke Mispar B'nei Menashe Pam Harishon. Points out that Ephraim, which is the tribe that's next to Menashe, the Alav is going on Ephraim. Next to Ephraim is Menashe. So over there, Ephraim is going to be 32,000. In other words, there's going to be, right now he's at about 40,000, 40,500 to be exact, is Ephraim. And then at the end of Pinchas, his number is going to go from 40,500 all the way down to 32,000. He's going to lose almost 8,000 men, 7,500 men from Ephraim are going to die because of the various sins, etc., and plagues that the Jewish people had. That 32,000 is the exact number that Menashe has now. So the 32,000 that Ephraim is going to have later is what Menashe has now. Is Menashe also going to shrink? No. Very interestingly, he's going to be Chamishim Elef. He's going to be over 50,000, 52,700, by the way. 52,700. He's going to grow, even though there's plagues, and even though men are going to die. Menashe is going to grow from 32,000 to 52,700. He's going to have a net gain of 20,200 people. That's a lot. He's going to end up being double the size of Ephraim, even though at this point Ephraim is 40,000, which is like I said, about 800 more. 8,000 more 7,500 more than Menashe is now. So here's Ephraim, here's Menashe. And at the end of Pinchas, it's going to go like this. There's going to be a shift, paradigm shift. It's going to be completely different. And what the Meshech Chochmah is saying now is v'zeh, the fact that it says v'alav, and next to him, which can also be translated, alav could also be translated as on him or above him, is what this pasuk is hinting at. V'zeh shemirames kan v'alav, shegavar alav echav b'minyan ad lemala. It's going to eventually, the tribe of Menashe is going to be much, much bigger than Ephraim. Masha ein ken be'enach b'kuchu lo hagiviru al roshe deglehem minyan hasheni. So he says that basically, since Ephraim is going to have such a loss, and Menashe is going to have such a gain, so that's why this pasuk is hinting at that here. No other pasuk are we going to have this no other tribe is going to have this huge variance in numbers. So that's why Menashe is described differently in these psukim all the way back here. And the point I want to say here, if it's not clear already, is that the Torah is beyond genius. The Torah is written in code, and although reading the psukim, just the Shnayim Mikra Echad Targum, in just numbers and translation, you're not putting everything in context. You're not seeing the forest for the trees, right? What might end up happening is you just get numbers and numbers and numbers. 32,000, 42,000, da, 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 and you're just, what does it all mean? What's the point? The point is each word, not saying v'hachonim alav and just saying v'alav, the Torah is already hinting to something that's going to be later on in the future. It's foreshadowing this drop in population in the tribe of Ephraim and this growth in the tribe of Menashe, and it's showing you the divinity of the Torah, the greatness of the Torah, which you can only see by reading the commentaries, by reading these kinds of mefarshim and going to these kinds of classes where you can learn Torah from the Gedolim like the Meshech Chochmah. Okay. Let's conclude the class tonight with a thought from one of our current Gedolim. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, so sei gesund Shlita, should live and be well. He writes in Tamad Dikra, he writes an interesting question. We're going to skip all the way to chapter 4, verse 9, which is almost at the very end of Parshat Bamidbar. It says there, oh, that's interesting. Why don't I have the Hebrew here? Ha ha ha. Interesting. Wonder why that happened. Safaria, I need to learn how to use you better. All right. It says there, well, maybe we can do this. Hold on. Let me see if I can. No, I can't. Oh, no, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, let's just not play around with it too much. So I guess Rav Chaim quotes the pasuk anyway. L'akchu beget chelet v'chisu et ha-menorah et ha-ma'or v'et nerotecha v'et melkachecha v'et machdotecha v'et kol klei shamna asher yishartu la bahem. You're going to take a blue wool cloth and cover the Menora of Light and its lamps, its tongues, and its pans, and also all its oil vessels, which are going to be used to minister for me. So the question I had in the email that I sent out is this: why is the menorah called the Menora HaMeor? The Menorah HaMeor. Strange, right? It's not called the menorah, it's called the Menora HaMeor. Where else have you seen the menorah called the Menora HaMeor? which, by the way, translates as the Menora of Light. Well, what other kind of menorah is there? Menora of darkness? Okay. The menorah of skin, the menorah of what? The menorah of PlayStation, the menorah of light. That's the only menorah there is. Sarach tam. We need a reason. Lama nikra kan b'shem menorah hamaor. So it says Rav Chaim, we need to know why the menorah is called the menorah hamaor. V'la yesh lomar api mashakatuv harashba b'tshuva siman shin tet. V'kach kasav haramban b'chudusha v'shabbat chav bet amud bet. So it says perhaps it has something to do with what the Rashba writes and what the Ramban writes. Both of these are both Rishonim. So they both write that there was in Isur the Asur lechavot hamenorah afilu biyom. They were not allowed to extinguish the menorah even in daytime. Okay. So how does that prove? How does the fact that it's called the Menora or the Menora of Light? How does that prove that the menorah could not be extinguished even in daytime? Afal gav the sfirlahu de biyom ein mitzvah shetahei doleket. Even though there was no mitzvah to have it lit during the day, right? The mitzvah was to light the menorah at night. You lit the menorah. Now you can put it out. Why would you put it out? Let me basically summarize what he's going to say. I'll tell you why you put out a menorah. Because you have to move it. The menorah was part of the Mishkan. The Mishkan was the Lego shul, the Lego temple, the Jewish people assembled and disassembled and brought with them all around the desert. And one of the things they had to take apart and disassemble and walk around with was the menorah. And if it was lit, you would think that they should be able to put it out. But says the Rashba, says the Ramban, and says Rav Chaim Kanievsky, no, they weren't allowed to put it out. Even though they didn't have any use, even though there wasn't a mitzvah for it to be lit during the day, they were not allowed to extinguish it. If it was extinguished, great. But if it wasn't, what do? You take this blue sky cover, this tchelet, this woolen tchelet, and you cover it, even while it's lit. And if you're covering it, even while it's lit, the miracle happened that it stayed lit, which means it was the Menora of lighting. It was the menorah. It was a lit menorah that traveled with the Jewish people under a cover where it should have been extinguished, but wasn't, miraculously, because there was a mitzvah to not extinguish the menorah no matter what. It's not just the menorah, it's the menorah hamaor. It gave off light. And he doesn't say this here, but it's very, very apropos that we're learning this right before Shavuot, which is the holiday of Torah. And we know the menorah was symbolic, is representative of Torah. And we should conclude with giving everybody who participated tonight with a bracha that the mitzvah you learn, the Torah you learn on Shavuot and afterwards should burn within you forever. Nothing should be able to put it out. Your chiba, your love for Hashem should be clear, and Hashem's love for you and all the Jewish people should be clear. To protect our children, the children of Israel right now in Eretz Yisrael and elsewhere, to protect us from this magefa, and should protect us from all kinds of danger, and should give us success in our Torah and mitzvot. We should all have achdut, and we should all see together the bringing of the shlamim to make the Yom Tov a holiday of Basar, as Benji said, and we should all see only simcha together.